narrative.
I sat there watching her. My wife, no, the woman I thought was my wife, stood across from me, arms crossed, staring at the floor like a child caught doing something bad. Except she didn't look guilty. She looked indifferent. Then she said it. I cheated because I needed a stronger man. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because of the sheer absurdity of it. Stronger? Stronger how? Physically? Emotionally? Financially? None of it made sense, but what hit me the hardest wasn't the confession itself. It was the way she said it, like it was some logical conclusion, like it was something I should have expected all along. I let the words sit in the air between us. I wanted to see if she'd take them back, if she'd show even the slightest bit of regret. But she didn't. She just stood there waiting for me to react, like my pain was some kind of experiment she was conducting. And then her family spoke. Well, can you blame her? I turned my head, slowly, almost in disbelief. It was her mother who had said it, arms folded just like her daughter. Same expression on her face, like they had rehearsed this moment, like they had been waiting for it. You've always been passive, her father chimed in. She needed more from you. A real man would have seen the signs. Her sister, sitting on the couch with her legs crossed, just shrugged. Honestly, we all saw it coming. I could feel it then. The walls weren't closing in, but something shifted inside me. It wasn't heartbreak, it was clarity. A kind of realization that felt so sharp it could cut through steel. They weren't defending her. They were blaming me. I glanced back at my wife. She still hadn't said a word, letting them speak for her, like they always did. I had spent years with this woman, given her everything I had, worked tirelessly to provide a life we could build together. And this was the thanks I got? Not just betrayal, but complete disrespect, as if I had brought it on myself. I exhaled slowly. There was no point in arguing. I knew that now. They had already made up their minds about me. The truth was, it had never really been my marriage. It had always been theirs. A family affair where I was just the extra piece, the provider, the outsider who was tolerated until I wasn't useful anymore. I looked at her one last time, searching for something, anything, that would make me feel like I was losing something important. But I felt nothing. That's when I smiled, and that's when I laughed. The laughter left my lips before I even thought about it. It wasn't forced. It wasn't a reaction I planned. It just came out, pure, raw amusement at the insanity of the situation. That's when the room exploded. Are you seriously laughing right now? Her sister snapped, her voice dripping with disbelief. Her mother leaned forward, her expression twisting into something close to disgust. This is exactly what we're talking about. You don't take things seriously. No wonder she needed someone else. I shook my head, looking at them all, letting my eyes settle on each one of their faces. They weren't just against me. They were convinced I was the villain in all of this. You're pathetic, her father muttered, shaking his head like he was embarrassed for me. Your wife is telling you she had to go elsewhere for what she needed, and this is how you react, her sister scoffed. Honestly, just leave already. You clearly don't deserve her. I almost wanted to ask what exactly I had done to deserve this, but I didn't. There was no point. In their eyes, I had already lost, and they weren't going to let me forget it. My wife? She was still silent, still standing there, letting them fight her battle for her, like she always did. It was almost funny how predictable it was. I sighed, rubbing my temple. So let me get this straight. She cheats on me, lies to me, betrays everything we built, and I'm the problem? Her mother's eyes narrowed. You pushed her to this. Her father nodded. A man who lets his wife feel neglected is no man at all. Neglected? That word almost made me laugh again. I had worked late nights to give us a comfortable life. I had been there for her when she cried over stupid fights with her sister, when she stressed about things that didn't even matter. I had held her when she felt insecure, reassured her when she doubted herself. I had been loyal. I had been present. And somehow none of that counted. I glanced at my wife, waiting to see if she would at least step in, take some responsibility. But she just stood there, biting her lip, her arms still crossed. Nothing. That was the final confirmation I needed. I had spent so much time trying to be the man she needed, but she had never actually wanted me. Not really. I had been convenient, and now I was disposable. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my keys, and twirled them between my fingers. Their voices grew louder, overlapping each other, all of them trying to get the last word in, trying to make sure I walked out of there believing I was the failure. But I wasn't listening anymore. I had already made my decision. I twirled my keys in my fingers, letting the metal clink together, a small sound in the middle of all their noise. They were still talking, still arguing, still trying to drill into my head that I was the reason for all of this. I stopped listening. I took one last look at my wife. She had barely moved, still standing there, arms crossed, face blank. She was waiting for something, for me to explode, for me to beg, for me to ask why, but I wasn't going to give her that. She didn't deserve it. I smirked, shaking my head. You know what? I'm done. The words hit the room like a bomb. Silence. For the first time since this disaster of a conversation started, no one spoke. They just stared at me. Then her mother scoffed. Oh, please, you're just being dramatic. Am I? I raised an eyebrow, slipping my keys into my palm. You all wanted me to take responsibility? Fine. I'll take responsibility for the one thing that actually matters. I turned toward the door. Leaving. My wife finally reacted. She stepped forward, her expression twisting into something between shock and anger. Wait, what? I didn't stop. Are you seriously walking out right now? Her father snapped. That's the kind of man you are? Running away? I let out a breath of laughter as I reached for the door handle. You've been telling me all night that I'm not a man, right? So why would you care what I do now? I pulled the door open. That's when the real panic started. Wait! My wife's voice was sharper this time, desperate almost. You're just going to leave? Just like that? I glanced over my shoulder. Yeah, just like that. You can't, her sister cut in, almost laughing like she thought this was some kind of bluff. You're seriously going to leave everything over one mistake? I raised an eyebrow. One mistake? My wife's jaw tightened. I told you why it happened. Yeah, you needed a stronger man. I heard you the first time. I gave her a look. Let him handle it then. Her eyes widened slightly, and for the first time, I saw it. Fear. I didn't wait for another word. I stepped through the doorway, out into the night, and slammed the door shut behind me. And just like that, I was free. Or so I thought. My phone started vibrating before I even made it to my car. The first call, then another, and another. By the time I sat in the driver's seat, my screen was lighting up like a damn Christmas tree. 50 missed calls. I stared at the screen, then chuckled to myself. Now they cared. The moment I started the engine, my phone kept lighting up, vibrating nonstop on the passenger seat. Call after call, her name, her mother's name, her sister, even her father. They were all taking turns, trying to break through the silence I had just given them. I didn't answer. I pulled out of the driveway without hesitation, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. The kind of peace that comes when you finally realize you don't owe anyone a damn thing. But they weren't ready to accept that. As I turned onto the main road, a message popped up. Then another. Then a flood of them. Her. Are you seriously ignoring me? You can't just leave like that? Her mother. You need to come back and talk like an adult. Her father. Coward. Her sister. Wow. Real mature. Running away like a little boy. I smirked. They really thought that they had that kind of power over me, that their words still carried weight. Then another message came in. I'm sorry, okay? Just answer me. Ah, and there it was, the shift, from anger to guilt tripping, from insults to apologies. It was a game, one they had played before, one she had mastered over the years. But I wasn't playing anymore. I kept driving. The messages didn't stop. Neither did the calls. My phone was shaking so much on the seat that it nearly slid onto the floor. Another message. Her. Please, just talk to me. I don't want to lose you like this. We can fix this. Fix what? The fact that she threw away everything we had for some guy she thought was stronger? The fact that her entire family had lined up to tell me I was the problem? She hadn't cared about fixing anything when she made that choice. I reached a stoplight, glanced at my phone, and for a brief second, thought about responding. Not because I wanted to, but because part of me was curious. Curious to see how far she would take it, what excuse she would come up with. But then, before I could even entertain the thought, another message came in. "You can't just leave me like this. I need you." Ah, so now she needed me. Not when she made her decision, not when she stood there arms crossed, letting her family tear me down, not when she watched me walk out the door. No, now. Now that reality was sinking in. I exhaled, feeling something inside me harden, something permanent. I reached for my phone, my fingers hovering over the screen for a second before I tapped exactly where I needed to. Blocked. Then I tossed the phone into the glove compartment, shut it, and drove forward without looking back. Blocking her number should have been the end of it. But people like her, they don't just let go. They don't just accept consequences. For the first few days, the silence was deafening. No calls, no texts, nothing. It was almost peaceful. I knew better than to believe it would last. And I was right. It started with mutual friends, people I hadn't heard from in months suddenly checking in, acting like they cared. The messages were always the same. "Hey man, I heard about what happened. You should really talk to her. She's going through a lot right now. Maybe just hear her out? You know, relationships go through things like this. Maybe you should consider forgiving her. Forgive her." She hadn't just made a mistake. She had made a choice that spit in the face of everything I had given her. A choice she stood by, right up until she realized her stronger man wasn't so strong after all. Because that's what was really happening. She thought she could trade up, thought she could swap me out for someone who was more exciting, more dominant, whatever the hell she convinced herself she needed. But the reality? The guy she cheated with wasn't interested in playing the role I had. He wasn't going to pay her bills. He wasn't going to handle responsibilities. He wasn't going to take care of her problems. She wasn't a wife to him. She was entertainment, a fun little escape from whatever life he actually lived. And now that I was gone, now that she wasn't cushioned by the security I had provided, now she understood what she had really done. I got the confirmation of it when I ran into an old coworker of hers at a coffee shop. A guy I barely knew, but who apparently knew all about my situation. "Dude," he said, lowering his voice like he was letting me in on a secret. "She's been a wreck, complaining about money, saying she doesn't know how she's going to keep up with everything now that you're gone." I just sipped my coffee. "Sounds like a personal problem." "Yeah, well," he shrugged. "She was talking about how she thought he'd step up, you know? The other guy. But I guess that didn't happen." Of course it didn't. I don't know what she expected. That some guy who was willing to screw another man's wife was suddenly going to play husband? That the same guy who entertained her complaints about me was going to be thrilled when those complaints became his burden? No. She gambled and lost. And now reality was setting in. Her family wasn't going to support her. They weren't going to pay for the life she had grown used to. And her stronger man? He had gotten what he wanted and moved on. And me? I was nowhere to be found. I learned that sometimes disappearing leaves a louder echo than any frantic call or desperate plea. After those early days of silence and scattered accusations, news of my absence began to spread, and the repercussions came swiftly. I watched from afar as my former life unraveled, each thread of the relationship coming undone as she faced the reality of her choices. I heard that she was struggling, forced to confront the practical consequences of a decision that, in hindsight, was both reckless and thoughtless. The other man, the one she had once believed to be a replacement, proved to be nothing more than a passing interest, someone who had never intended to shoulder the responsibilities of a committed partnership. In his absence, she found no comfort, no assurance that life would continue as it once had. Her family, who had rallied to support her narrative when it suited their purpose, slowly withdrew their empathy as the true cost of her actions became apparent. Without the structure I once provided, bills began to pile up, and daily life grew increasingly burdensome. I was aware of these developments not because I cared about the minutiae of her downfall, but because they confirmed the clarity of my decision. There was no point in trying to mend something that was irrevocably broken. I had chosen my path, one where I reclaimed control over my life and refused to be entangled in the consequences of a betrayal that was not solely mine to bear. With every update I received from old friends and acquaintances, a quiet resolve deepened within me. I had let go for a reason, and while others might have wished for a dramatic confrontation or an emotional reconciliation, I was determined to leave no space for further drama. My former life with her had been a series of compromises and silent sacrifices. I had given more than I ever received, and now, as she grappled with the reality of managing her own affairs, the situation was clear. It wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about the natural consequence of choices made. A relationship is built on mutual contributions, and when one partner chooses to undermine that balance, the foundation crumbles. I had stepped away before the collapse became too burdensome, leaving her to face the fallout. I encountered friends who asked if I regretted leaving, if I ever planned to go back. Their questions, however well-meaning, fell on ears that had long since tuned out the remnants of a past life. I simply shook my head and explained that sometimes the best way to heal is to close the door permanently, not to keep it ajar in hopes of reconciliation that never truly exists. There was no dramatic comeback, no desperate phone call in the middle of the night, no moment of vulnerability that forced me to reconsider. I had found a new rhythm, a life unburdened by the weight of misplaced expectations and constant criticism. As time passed, she remained entangled in her own making. The absence of my steady presence served as a harsh reminder of the structure she had lost. While she attempted to rebuild, the experience left scars that were both visible and hidden. There was no poetic redemption in her struggle. It was a straightforward lesson in cause and effect. She had chosen a path that led her to this point, and now she had to navigate it alone. In the end, my departure wasn't a defeat or a surrender. It was a final statement. I had walked away from a situation that had become toxic and unsustainable. The man who never returned wasn't running away. He was moving forward. And as I continued on my journey, I left behind a clear message. When you lose sight of what truly matters, the cost is inevitable, and no amount of pleas or false promises can reverse that truth. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.